Hello, everyone, and welcome to another very special live episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm your host, Skillicorn, and I'm thrilled to have with me back again Simon Hill, the CEO of Wazoku, and since we last spoke, now also the CEO of Innocentive. Simon, it's wonderful having you here today.
Good to be back again, Nick. Good to see you.
Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. So I know most of the people around Idea to Value, they've heard of you, they've heard of Wazoku, but for those few stragglers who don't know about Wazoku or Innocentive yet, can you just give us a brief sort of highlight as to what those companies are doing? Sure.
So hi to everybody, and this is also my first live one of these. So let's see how this one goes. And as I just mentioned to Nick, there are two small people running around my house. So on the off chance we get any visitors, you can greet them, and I'll kick them out of the room again. So quick introduction to the two brands and the two businesses that we're sort of in the process of bringing together. So Wazoku is fundamentally a software business, right? We operate in the innovation space, as it says kind of behind me, where innovation works. And we're very much focused on helping organizations through software and then sort of augmenting capability and capacity building around all of that to build innovation systems and develop innovation at scale capability. The way we do that is providing an idea management solution, an open innovation solution, and then the kind of wrapper of services to help make those things effective for organizations. So scalable, flexible, off-the-shelf software to help people manage ideas and drive innovation outcomes at scale. Okay, and just for anyone who's listening live as well, if you're listening live on LinkedIn, if you type any comments down, I should be able to see the comments, any ones that make sense. If you've got questions or just want to say hello, I can bring up on screen as well, and we can see where that discussion takes us. Other than that, I'm always thrilled to find out where people are listening in from today. So if you just want to say hi, Nick, love the show, listening in from Trinidad and Tobago or Somalia. Those are two examples that I've had previously. So wherever you are, good to say hi. So Simon, that's Wazoku. But one thing that I'm really excited to talk to you about is actually what's changed since the last time we talked. Wazoku acquired someone else in the innovation space that some people may have heard of, some people may not have heard of. What's that company, and what are they doing in the innovation space? So we acquired a business called Innocentive, who, and it was an exciting thing for us, right? Innocentive was one of the very early pioneers of open innovation. So started in the late 90s, actually. So kind of early days of .com and internet, as a spin out from the global pharmaceutical business Eli Lilly. So it came out of Eli Lilly's labs, that they were early pioneers of such things, and the concept of Innocentive, for people that aren't familiar with it, and it's a pretty well-known brand and done some pretty amazing things for some large brands around the world, is this concept of a two-sided marketplace, which was very, very, very pioneering in 1999, and for me is a really kind of squares the circle of our offering as we go forward. So on the one side, you've got all of the organizations that are trying to drive innovation and solve complex problems. And on the other side, so that's the sort of the seeker side of people that are trying to solve things. And on the other side of the marketplace is this incredible crowd of about 500,000 inventors, innovators, tinkerers, and others who are really just amazing problem solvers. And so we sit in between the two and sort of broker connections between problems that we have PhDs now on staff that are experts in
deconstructing these problems, abstracting them away from the pain that you've solved, because thinking in the box hasn't helped you to solve it as a company, but thinking slightly differently around it possibly will, and then throwing that problem out to this crowd of 500,000 people with some level of incentive or prize tied to that. We acquired that business, but over the years they've run thousands of these challenges and delivered some, as I said, some incredible solutions, often to problems that these companies have not been able to solve, not just for a few weeks or a few months, but for decades, right? And they've proven adept as a very generally skilled crowd, right? It's a very big mix of people at solving some of the world's biggest and most complicated innovation challenges.
I think I've obviously been aware of Innocentive for the last couple of decades. As you said, they were a pioneer in the open innovation space. And they were really one of the examples being held up as wisdom of the crowd, where companies might be struggling with a very specific problem internally, but someone with an outsider perspective came along with a different way of approaching the problem and solved it.
Yeah.
Have you got any sort of specific examples that made you think, okay, Innocentive, they're really doing things right. They're approaching solving challenges in a new way, sort of case study that you really liked?
Yeah, I think you and I have known each other for quite some time, but we probably reconnected recently because when I bought this business, some of the assets that I acquired alongside it was this incredibly rich but not really very well exploited set of stories of the people that had solved all of these challenges over the years. And I decided in the midst of a pandemic and also buying a company to also write a book that was telling some of those stories. So we put together the 50 of those individual stories, and I wanted to tell the tale of the story behind the solution, right? What are the motivations? What are the characters like that live, for most people as a nameless, faceless sort of database that we run these challenges out to. So they're phenomenal, right? I think it's amazing to see what these people have delivered, but also to really validate the things that we as innovators talk about all the time, right? This importance of diversity, the need to think differently, because many of these people they're not the experts you'd go looking for when you're trying to solve it, right? There's a really nice story of there was a big oil spill up in sort of northern Alaska, Canada area, and for 20 years the best people had been thrown at trying to figure out the problem of how to get this very gloopy oil out of freezing cold waters up in the Arctic, and couldn't do it, right? It's this 20-year-old sort of ecological disaster that's floating around up there. Innocentive ran this challenge out, and a non-specialist whose life had taken them in a direction that was nothing to do with this, but had a summer job when he was a teenager working in construction, was reminded of how in construction you keep cement from setting with a little vibrating rod, and applied the same logic to that thing that he'd seen that was a thing that had been retained in his mind but was nothing to do with his skill set, to the solution that he brought back through Innocentive that they took out, and he actually ended up flying up there and using some of the winnings that he'd got from his idea to helping make it live, and actually fixing the ecological issue that for 20 years had plagued experts around the world of how to get this oil out of the water. So you get these brilliant people often drawing from bits of their earlier lives or things that really interested them, but their careers took them in different directions because there were jobs where they lived that did the things that they really liked that have just come to bear. And there are thousands of these stories. That's just obviously one of them that kind of resonated with me, but there are thousands of them. And it's that really interesting bit that they're not the person you would ever normally go to solve this problem that often solves it.
So let's take that to back to today then. You've now got two of the most established methods of getting ideas from many people, whether it's with Wazoku within certain companies and then Innocentive outside of companies. What's your strategy behind that? How do you see the future of, let's call it open innovation? Do you still call it open innovation, or just getting ideas from wherever might be the most appropriate, internally in the company or outside?
So I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I think we, to a certain extent, have been rowing against the tide in a sector that itself is really still finding its own definition and its own identity within global organizations. It's still lacking a really strong centralized owner within the business. My personal opinion is every CEO needs to step up and take real ownership for innovation within their businesses, and the ones that don't probably won't be CEOs for too long, or won't have companies to be CEOs of if they do not. But this is also much more about getting, and part of the reason for that is that innovation teams can fight a good fight, but hanging them off the periphery or not enabling this to be a part of the fabric of the way that businesses work isn't going to drive long-term sticky success, right? And so we have to change the way that we think about the operating system and where innovation sits within it, not alongside it, right? So we took an investment a few years ago to really build for innovation at scale and to develop innovation as a core competency that should exist, much like you sort of see agile moving out of the world of software into a skill set that exists across organizations. We felt that the innovation toolkit and innovation skills should be as available to the audit team and the accountancy team and the legal team as it is to the innovation team and the R&D team and others as well. And wanting to build for scale. So yes, enabling the internal, also enabling the inside out and the outside in to help solve problems holistically wherever they are, right? And so we've been building tech that works at scale, that allows that to happen at scale. And Innocentive, as I said earlier, is kind of the missing quadrant of a four-piece square, which says, if you're not solving problems and driving innovation with your workforce, your partners, your customers, and the whole world, then you're missing a trick, right? And that enables you to pull risk forward and push cost out holistically across the way that you work, right? So that's what we're doing. Forward-thinking organizations get it, and everybody else is a bit kind of like, but it's a growing movement, and I'm seeing much more, or I'm seeing a number now of chief execs that really are starting to get out of the very short-term thinking that's sort of been embedded in a lot of the way that organizations have been forced to work in recent times, and risk coming right back onto the table, and innovation obviously and risk sit side by side in my mind.
It's obviously been a very challenging time for a lot of companies, not just with financial constraints, with some businesses going out of business in the last year due to COVID, but also very much a change in the way that companies work, and more of an acceptance of working remotely using digital systems. What's been your experience over the last year? Has a software as a service based, crowd-based way of collecting and managing ideas, have you benefited from COVID? Have you sort of just accelerated what was previously happening? What's been your experience?
So I think we as a business have continued to grow, right? We're in an emerging sector, and so as one of the leading players, if not the leading player in an emerging growth sector, if we couldn't continue to grow. And also we're a asynchronous collaboration tool that can help you to solve problems. Plus the external crowd helped when people couldn't get into their R&D labs and everything else. These people have never had R&D labs in my crowd. They've always been remote and on-demand talent. And so it's been, we've been able to support and add value, which is really the important side of that coin, which has been good for us as a company. But I think it really shows the utility of what we're doing. The thing that I'm quite excited about now is I see a real convergence between the sort of for purpose and the sort of for profit elements of what we can do for organizations. And we've taken a real investment as a company in the sort of for purpose element of what we're all about, right? We became carbon neutral last year. We're on the pathway to becoming a B Corp. And we're doing all of that because the values that we have as a business, but also the values we want to put out for the customers that we're working with. And I think that you will see a lot more innovation happening in areas that are societally beneficial rather than necessarily for competitive advantage, which will be good because it's easier for businesses sometimes to invest in those things for reasons, whether good or just good words, but actually I think you will see more of it, which will bring innovation into a different bit of the business, and I actually think will proliferate it out more as well. So I think that's one of the biggest shifts that I've seen, and more businesses coming to us to help engage all those different stakeholders and audiences in building out their future business with a much more sustainable and environmental lens tied to it as they go forward.
When we spoke last, Wazoku was one of the few providers of these software solutions that was really keeping their services away from the consulting side, where a lot of other providers said, "Oh, we'll come in and help you run these workshops or idea management campaigns, and then, by the way, we'll also help you do other workshops at strategy and everything else." And that's how they were making their money. So how has that strategy sort of either continued for you, or how is the Wazoku business, and now with Innocentive, how's the business model evolved over the last 4 years since we last spoke?
So I think it's a good question, and it's the perennial challenge, right? You and I know each other from consultancy times, and my humble opinion is that those two business models don't work particularly well for scale side by side, right? Software is typically high margin and scalable, but requires a lot of investment to hopefully break through the other side and grow. It's very different on that sort of human capital, non-scalable resource side of a professional services business. But you do need services around quite complex tech that's landing into complex organizations. And so what we really focus on is, so in my mind, we have these sort of 4 Ps that we talk about, right? So we've got people, platform, process, and purpose. And there are elements of each of those that require levels of learning pathways and capability enablement and framework. So one of the good things that Innocentive came equipped with was a trademarked and well-proven methodology called challenge-driven innovation, which is an adaptation of some of the strategizer outcome-driven innovation and sort of the stage gating process to how you do things, to really jump to the end of the process and think about the outcomes you're trying to find, and then spend a lot of time really thinking about the formulation of the problem statement at the front end. So we do more facilitation than we used to do. We have more toolkits and more off-the-shelf ready things to enable people. But I'm still very much of the mindset that the best way to achieve this is to teach you to fish rather than do the fishing for you. And so we on the whole are very much focused on building capability and capacity inside the organizations that we work with to do this themselves, rather than coming in and doing it. But we've also got this amazing network of global partners that can do that work, and they've got the right business model and the right skills to do it. And that was the key investment and key strategic decision we took years ago that I think we're still very true to today.
I couldn't agree more. I think that you need to enable people to do innovation themselves. It sounds like at the beginning when you were talking about these various toolkits and capability building tools that should help spread innovation across the entire organization, not just the R&D team or the innovation team. What's been your findings over the last couple of years, though, about a desire to innovate? I know that back in 2016, 17, around that time, there was a lot of companies sort of popping up saying, we're going to help you do idea management, we're going to automate it, it's all going to be wonderful. And there was a bit of a buzz in the market. But then I've seen in the last couple of years a bit of backlash to what some people call innovation theater in a lot of companies that aren't doing that particularly well. So what's been your sort of views and experience there?
So I just finished writing something actually that said, "This isn't Broadway, let's stop acting," right? On as a kind of open piece to people that are still think it is Broadway and this is all about shiny things and everything else. Right? The real graft and hard work and investment and everything that goes into all of this is I think actually as global businesses we do great R&D, we do great innovation. The challenges that we have is it's still relatively localized within certain parts of our businesses. And what we're trying to do is to modify that DNA. It's where I think the concept of an innovation system really comes to play, right? How do you manage to maintain your bureaucratic, hierarchical, process-driven business of today, which is important, but overlay it with more informal networks that operate to different rules that allow you to test and break and try things, which is why I genuinely believe that the ability through a well-structured program, through a good bit of tooling, but really just a strong methodology that allows you to engage a broader network of people, whether inside or outside of your business, quicker, and therefore test ideas quicker. And we've proven this over and over again, right? It can be 4 or 5 times faster and 8 to 10 times cheaper than the normal approach. I just did a project, or a challenge, as we call them, for a global pharmaceutical business, which kind of proves this point, right? So they had a problem with a specific drug that they were trying to develop a set of hypotheses as to why this problem was occurring. They've got these amazing, minds internally working on it who've got all the data. They've got it real time feeding to them and everything else. And over the course of about 9 months, they came up with a working set of hypotheses. Towards the end of that process, we engaged with them, and they were interested, and they gave us about 10% of the information that they had, and about 30 days. And with 10% of the information in 30 days, the crowd came up with the same set of hypotheses that they developed over 9 months, right? And also a few other ideas they hadn't considered, as the best of the best people looking at all of this. And that's not their fault, but that really just proved that point, that we could have done it 8 to 10 times faster. It was a month, not 9 to 10 months. And for a fraction of the cost, right? It cost them a little bit of money to reward a few people that had some brilliant ideas. And these are not little sort of Twitter-esque ideas. People write almost theses when it comes back to these submissions on the open innovation side. So I think there's a lot of hope. There is a lot of change as well, right? And innovation goes like this. We're in a bit of a lull at the moment, but that's in what people think they're investing in. There is still a huge amount of investment in the businesses that we run today that are digitizing and transforming at pace in the middle of this pandemic, and we shouldn't forget that, right? I think it's innovation teams that are being cut, and they've never been my biggest sort of bellwether of what's really happening, because they're at the behest of the CEO who will cut when he has to cut, right? And that's, or when he or she has to cut. So.
Simon, I've really enjoyed our chat so far. I know we're coming up on time, but I'd like to leave with one last question, and it's around incentives and rewards for innovation. Now, Innocentive, it's right there in the name, but there's always been this challenge and different sort of viewpoints and theories about how you incentivize and reward people within a company to be involved in innovation, and then external people where it might effectively be a freelance gig coming up with ideas. What's been your view about whether or not there's one way to incentivize people, what works for different groups, or if it really needs to be different depending on the context?
I mean, it's a whole podcast, I would say, Nick, is the answer to that, which gives you part of the answer, which is that I think there isn't a one-size-fits-all piece to that, which I think is probably intuitive, right? It's there's an element of sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs to some of that, which can fit into other research that's been done around the sort of intrinsic motivations. Again, I'd say I learned a lot by the interviews and the stories that we told in the One Smart Crowd book, which really looks at this. For some people, this is their job, right? They enter these things and this is how they make their money, and they talk about not being able to find work that was meaningful to them in their parts of the world, and this is how we do it. For other people, they've had their careers and they talk about it as their game, right? It's the thing that keeps them intellectually attuned and turned on, and they get to work on real world problems rather than theories. And so they could sit and do a crossword or a Sudoku, but actually this is the thing they get really into, and it teaches them amazing new things. So you've got this army of people that are differently incented, and it's the same inside businesses, right? It's linked to what you pay them and how valued they feel and whether the job they're doing is the thing they really want to be doing or not. And we have to really get into this sort of much more personalized approach to the way that we think about reward and recognition across the spectrum, but innovation's as good a focal point as any.
Perfect. I think that's a perfect point to leave it on. Simon, I've been really enjoying our conversation. For those people who don't know everything about Wazoku, Innocentive, or yourself yet, what's the best place they can go to find out more?
I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and our two websites are there. So wazoku.com, innocentive.com. Anyone that's interested in the One Smart Crowd book, it's available on Amazon and doing pretty well over there. So it's not, for me, that's not something I'm trying to make lots of money off. We just sell it at cost, but it just puts it out there for people to have a look at. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to share any relevant war stories from my side anytime. And thanks again, Nick.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.